Today's talk focuses on the question, GM Lutz right? Tesla semi banned in the EU. The second thing we take a look at is we just picked up some new information about new countries that have been added to the list of places that the pre-orders are being taken for the semi. And we wanted to review those countries as well as have some comments based on new developments in that space. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also wanted to say thank you to those of you who like our show. Please take time to subscribe. Makes a huge difference. Also wanted to thank our Patreon supporters, because without you, changes like the microphone, lighting, everything we're doing is supported by the efforts you make to support us, and we appreciate it. So as you'll notice, our B-roll today includes the semi, but it's also the Model Y introduction. So we do have some semi in there, and I hope you enjoy. So today's kind of interesting because we like to do 2 trucking shows a month at least. And we started doing research in preparation for this show and landed on what we think is a pretty exciting, interesting topic. And what that is the Tesla semi banned in Europe? And maybe Bob Lutz was right, is a theme we chose. So the first thing that we wanted to look at is the fact that Europe has a concept called cab over. So what's fascinating about the cab over phenomenon is the fact that in essence you have the driver sitting directly over the cab or directly over the wheel, and it's a square truck, so that design is called cab over. The idea behind it is that you end up with a circumstance, or there are goods and bads to it. The good thing about it is it gives you a shorter turning ratio so that vehicles can operate in tight spaces much more easily than trucks that kind of have a longer wheelbase. When you have this shorter wheelbase, drivers don't tend to have sleeping cabins in those vehicles. You also find that it's a little bit bumpier ride to sit directly over the tire in that fashion. But the EU actually gave the trucking companies a choice. They could do cab over or use the space for the vehicle to have a shorter back end or carrying area. And so by and large, the truck manufacturers elected to make for a cab over design that takes up less space because they wanted to use as much space as possible to carry freight. Hence, Europe has become sort of a cab over maven or haven, and therefore Tesla is really not a good fit for an environment like that. So the question then pops up, what is Tesla going to do given European norms and how that affects the company? And we were stunned to find out, well, part of our analysis was perhaps this is the reason why Tesla only has 3 countries in Europe into which you can now order the semi. And we were thinking perhaps there's a possibility that the restrictions on the nature of trucking, namely cab over, which Tesla does not offer, might impact the degree to which companies were willing to order that product in other countries. And so therefore, the truck might be handicapped in a way that's, I want to say, irreparable. Turns out something very amazing, interesting occurred. We came across a piece that Teslarati initially presented in March, but went back and looked. And something strange or interesting has been happening, which is the EU Commission in charge of regulations has been using Tesla as the guide for how sort of trucks will look and pollute in the future. So this is, we think, pretty awesome news. So basically what the news is that while Tesla is not competitive now and the truck doesn't exist to be there, by September of 2020, new rules will allow the trucks to be extended, I believe it's between 80 and 90 centimeters, facilitating a design that's more aerodynamically friendly. So the European Commission, in essence, decided that there are a number of benefits that come with the design that Tesla has. Number one, truck deaths on the highway every year in Europe is approximately 4,000. In the case of in the case of pedestrians and bicyclists, that number is at about 1,000 people. One of the ways in which the EU was hoping to leverage the design choice that Tesla has made is to actually now offer the opportunity for truckers or to redesign the front of their vehicles to provide better sight lines for truckers so that they can see those pedestrians and bicyclists better, which is part of what Tesla's design allows. The second part that they cited was that with allowing the trucks to be modified to embrace the aerodynamic aspects of the Tesla Semi, you now have a situation where there's between a 5 and 10% cost reduction related to wind resistance that those vehicles have. So it seems that, so now in essence, the EU is encouraging its manufacturers to modify the front of their trucks as they move, electric or no, to embrace the aerodynamic potential because of overall cost reductions. So there are other benefits cited, but I was stunned, impressed that at this point Tesla isn't a fit, but there's no real truck for anybody to drive. And the EU regulators have been making changes to embrace what it is that Tesla is bringing to the change process. So one other element that wasn't highlighted along with the comments that were shared here is the fact that there's this, the EU Commission came up with basically a Tesla-centric set of penalties for competing manufacturers. And in essence, the EU's, in its eminent wisdom, is of the feeling that a lot of the big companies in Europe are dragging their feet when it comes to porting all types of vehicles, including into the electric space. And so they've basically taken the opportunity to go ahead and install regulations that pretty much starts to penalize trucking companies as well as auto companies starting in 2020 and 21, and then the severity of the punishment increases over time to, in essence, force manufacturers to start having an impact in this space. So the net of the whole thing is that Tesla is sort of not competitive right now because the EU laws don't allow it. But in essence, what's starting to happen is after seeing the truck and the specs that have been articulated, the EU has basically changed the rules to facilitate Tesla's ability to operate in the space successfully. And the rules have been changed to embrace all of the differences that Tesla brings to the environment, and is installing new rules that force a whole bunch of other entities to sort of join the Tesla party, if you will. So we talked a little bit about over time that sort of the Tesla miracle, and I just have to say, if that's not a miracle, you got to tell me, what's a miracle? Because here you have a situation where a company to some degree you could competitive, but then all of a sudden it's really competitive because the standard that's been and all the other manufacturers that they enter electric space, they can first install aerodynamics if they're unable to meet Tesla at the electric zone, but beyond that there are these other elements. Now, I think it's interesting to watch the regulators in the EU, and it's good that they want to get electric going. It's good they want to push, given that Tesla's done it. The one problem that I'm noticing is that if you try to do Tesla's aerodynamics on a truck with the need to have an engine in the front of the vehicle, it's very hard because that's a lot of parts that you have to get in there. So even in the US, trucks aren't able to greatly modify the front of the vehicles to embrace aerodynamics because you have to accommodate the needs that cooling, there are all kinds of elements for combustion engines that need to be addressed. So basically the smell of things is until competing entities are able to move strongly into the electric space. And we've seen some decent trucks coming out of Daimler Benz in this regard. We think that it kind of might be a landslide at this point in favor of Tesla if they're able to get these trucks out the door. So we look forward to your comments on this element of the show. I see raging comments going on from folks there, but we generally sort of comment and say hello at the end of the show, and we'll do so today as well. So the second part of the show today, that what we wanted to cover was the fact that it's usually concrete information about the truck because Tesla tends to be fairly closed-mouthed about it. And then there is even weird stuff happening. For example, Jerome Guillaume was running the truck operations and then was put in charge of all automobiles. And he went to do a speech in Norway, actually the Netherlands, and he was asked, well, when will the vehicle be available or orderable in the Netherlands? And he said, I didn't know. And so 2 days later, Tesla's website opened up ordering ability for folks in the Netherlands. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to see a senior executive not know the deal, and then all of a sudden the deal changes, embracing kind of what he was doing. Now, there are 3 locations that have been allowed or included in Tesla's early order process. As you know, there's the Founders Edition, and then there's a regular edition order. In the case of the Founders Edition, it's a $200,000 payment that needs to be in within 30 days of the order, which covers approximately the entire cost, of the vehicle. In the case of non-Founder Edition, I believe there's a $20,000 payment required for each truck, well ahead when it's due. So this is kind of interesting to us because some of the things that are going on here kind of don't make sense. For example, in the case of Britain, the deposits being, so the 3 countries are UK, Netherlands, and Norway that are open for ordering currently on the Tesla website. The fact is that the UK has Brexit issues, so who knows how pricing is going to go out depending on whether Brexit does or does not occur. There are other issues like, the UK is a relatively small market. Germany is perhaps the wealthiest country in Europe, and it's not one of those 3 where orders are being allowed, and there are reasons you could see that. And by the way, Norway is perhaps the largest per capita consumer of Tesla vehicles, so I guess we could definitely see it happening there in the Netherlands. But even Norway is a little bit questionable because when, in cold climates like that, the 250 or 500 range vehicles that Tesla has been discussing don't really seem as viable in super cold environments where the batteries have to warm themselves before they're able to do their work. So, I thought that was interesting. A sidebar note related to all this is that from our count, the official number is somewhere around 1,000 trucks that have been ordered in the Founders Edition. K is about $200 million. As you go through sort of what's implied in terms of people that have ordered and they're not showing themselves, our thinking is there's about $1 billion worth of cash there between Founders Editions as well as non-Founders Edition vehicles. But given European countries being opened up, that number actually could be higher. We were actually surprised to not see China in the mix for ordering these vehicles either, and perhaps that's because of the BYD trucking options that they have. But it is kind of a surprise to see that not be the case. The next sort of analysis of this that we have is that why those three countries in particular. Why not go towards some of the other countries? Obviously, France and Germany are the big two that are missing here. And, the UK doesn't seem to be a major player in the whole sort of EV revolution, even though they are, in fact, there. So, hats off to the fact that Tesla is elected to somewhat release early and allow those countries to participate in the distribution of the vehicle early. So, we have learned our lesson in terms of don't do too much speculation because people will go nuts on you. So we're leaning away from the speculation and we're leaning towards give you the information and let's have a dialogue about how and why it's occurring and when it might occur. Now, the next question that pops up is there was a comment that just rolled by regarding, when is the Model Y coming out? And frankly, when is the Tesla, the semi coming out? When is the pickup truck? There are all these vehicles that are stacked up in the nearing to be done zone. And the answer that we'll give is we expect everything to be late. And the reason is that, there's battery shortages. There's a lot of demand for the existing vehicles. And it seems like the priority right now of the company is for us to get the Model 3s out there in large numbers and then follow that on with the Model Ys off the same platform and generate as much cash as possible in that process. So the gut feeling we're having is, trucks take 3 cars worth of batteries. So the battery consumption by the truck in particular is somewhat brutal, but it's impressive that a lot of the folks who put up these deposits and have been waiting a year and a half have been patient about it and seem to be willing to maintain their patience into next year. The next item that pops up is of these trucks with 100 or so, for example, Walmart, Pepsi come to mind, JB Hunt, there's a number of some. So one of the questions that's popping up is, hey, yes, the founders are going to be able to, based on the early payments, be in the front of the line. But, how many trucks realistically can you produce? And as we watch cars rolling in, the trend seems to be you start up at about 1,000 vehicles a month and maybe get up to the 2 to 3K over a few months. And if you've got sort of huge demand in the U.S. domestic market, how long is it going to be until those vehicles get into Europe as the next phase? So the answer we have to it is that, yes, those vehicles will get out there. It may actually be later and longer than predicted, but they will show up. The other thing I think is going to occur is that depending on how the introduction in China plays out, that will be a major impactor on how things go for rolling out other vehicles, because if China can start picking up large amounts of vehicles that would normally have been produced in the United States and shipped around the world, you now have room, you have bandwidth to start producing other things on the current lines of Tesla. So we look forward to seeing what's going to happen here. Things are definitely already late. We'd like to not see them be later than they currently are. But, hats off to Tesla on getting a great product out there on all fronts and, in essence, shifting the market in the process. So we're kind of looking forward to, what you guys have to say about this. I thought, to be honest with you, when I started doing our research, we were of the opinion that the reason Tesla didn't choose to go to a lot of European countries is that they were going to have to figure out this cab over technology problem. And would Tesla have to boost the cab over, as you saw in the case of Nikola, that in order to meet European standards, they in fact have developed a cab over uh, truck that was on display, particularly targeted towards the European market. So this really answered the question, what is Tesla going to do about this cab over issue, with the Europeans electing to move with Tesla rather than against it as it enters the trucking business all over the world, especially including in the European Union. So, as always, we look forward to any and all comments that you might have. I have to admit that I'm happy to answer questions now if you guys have any. I tried to blend a couple of them that you had posed in to the comments I just shared. But, we like to talk about trucks. It's been sort of the primary focus of our show, and we like to add value whenever we can in that process. And look forward to your sharing, any and all comments that you might have in this space. Just a reminder, don't forget, don't eat within 4 hours of going to bed, preferably at least 2 hours, prevent acid indigestion. Also wanted to encourage you to remember to do 25 leg lifts per leg on a daily basis, strengthening the quad muscles and reducing the chance of knee-related issues. We actually broached the subject of marijuana usage as a pain management technique versus opioids, looking at the fact that there's less issues. We've mentioned there's a comment that just popped across. There is no official date, Michael, Vladimir. We've been suggesting outsourcing the trucks for a long time. The answer seems to be that there's no way. It seems that the battery volume has been affecting whether or not the trucks were going to come out. So my best guess is that it looks like midsummer next year that we'll see the trucks coming out. And, obviously that could slip a few months, but we think there'll be enough battery to service them by then. So that's sort of our analysis of that. Yeah, absolutely. Core technology can be kept in-house, Vladimir. Michael, thanks for the comment on CBD working. One of the interesting problems in the United States right now is that I actually met someone who works for the government, and she shared that, good question, Emmanuel. What's my take on Rivian? They're doing well, and I think it's funny because everything's always a competitive thing relative to Tesla, and I think it's a good company. They're building a good product. I think we know that Tesla has a competitive advantage when it comes to range as well as battery control technology affecting how that range is. So others have to put in a lot more batteries to try to catch up with Tesla's range, which actually increases the weight and hurts those other vehicles. So not a big deal. I have to admit that, I've missed some of the early questions or comments shared because I really wanted to stay on point as we've been requested previously. And, I think what I'm leaning towards now is to maybe close up our show, ask you to leave comments at the end, and we can respond to those. And everybody else watching the show after we go through this process gets an opportunity to toss in ideas and, generate perhaps a vibrant conversation as well. This is a reminder. We really greatly appreciate your taking time out to like and subscribe. So, Patreon support is also greatly appreciated. We have an interesting show coming up next week. There's a company here that who pays for the charging stations for the trucks, or is it part of the cost? James, thanks for the comment. the reality is that part of the reason why there's been very little discussion of what's going on with trucks is that it's not designed to be a consumer level product. The folks that are actually building or buying the trucks are associated with very large fleets that have plenty of money to build their own charging facilities. The other issue is, yes, they're paying for the electricity because it's their electricity they're using for their own uses. What we've seen in the United States is the trucks actually being able to sort of commandeer 3 or 4 supercharger facilities at the same time and power up a truck that way. So that may be the backup method. But mega chargers and superchargers at the distribution hubs is sort of the norm that we're anticipating and seeing in terms of answering that question. So, at any rate, wanted to thank you all again once for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lehitrot, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Hejdu, Swedish, and in Jamaica, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, Ni hao ma, Chinese, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Have a great weekend, and bye for now.